Hello, Logic community. Thanks for stopping by. See, we got some people in the chat already. Rex, Andy, Glenn, Michael. How you guys doing? It's a good day today. Thanks for tuning in. Got some great stuff going on. Glad you guys are here. But first, gotta make sure the transition is good. Hello, everyone. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to Logic Live number 107. I'm your host, Amanda Elliott, and today's guest is Mark LaRue. Before we get started, let's check out the slideshows from our sponsors. The episode of Logic Live is brought to you by AJA. They make the best video hardware in the business and have been an essential part of Flame since 2006. For more information about their pro video solutions, check out aja.com. And a huge Logic welcome to our newest sponsor, HotSpring. The future of VFX outsourcing, HotSpring connects you to the great artists to get your projects done, making it easier than ever to access the best talent around the world. Check them out at thehotspring.com. And if you're in the market for any Boris Effects plugins, please use the Logic discount code and save yourself 15% on any of their products, standalone or subscription, when you use the code Logic-2022, and yes, it's 2022, at checkout. And the Logic merch store. Yeah, check it out, man. Look your best while you make your best. Get all this amazing swag at logic.tv and check out the merch button on top. We want to thank all of our patrons subscribed on Patreon. You are very much appreciated. We cannot do what we do here at Logic without your support. And the list keeps on growing. We're up to 154 patrons as of this week. We want to thank each and every one of you again. We could not do what we do here without your support. And if you'd like to support what we're doing here on Logic, get yourself some exclusive content like the post Q&A with our guest and also some merch. Head on over to patreon.com/logictv and support what we're doing for as little as $5 a month. The Logic Forum is where we are in the Logic community, where we go and ask and answer questions or just go to talk about all things Flame, and every week the list keeps on growing. The forum stats for 2023, we got 1,281 users, 328,000 page views, 1,800 posts, 617 users on Discord, so it's up 7 from last week. And speaking of Discord, if you haven't joined the Discord chat, please do. It's another great place to have more of the Logic experience. We have real-time chat, screen sharing, and it's been a lot of fun to hang out with your fellow Flame artists. You can sign up for free at forum.logic.tv and click on the Discord link. The challenge coins have shipped. I think we're even giving more on the way. They showcase the program you love, you know and love, as well as the community that you know and love. And a huge shout out to Glenn Teal. Thank you, Glenn Teal. If you haven't heard, Flame artist Glenn Teal has been helping us out a lot with Logic by taking the initiative to produce the Logic podcast. He's been doing an amazing job getting these underway, and we are getting new episodes all the time. So thank you very much. Go check it out. If anyone has any suggestions for podcast topics or interview subjects, shoot a message over to Glenn on the forum, Glenn Teal, all one word. Always great to get more fresh content on the podcast. What is a Flame artist? Very good question. Announcing new YouTube Shorts content from Austin Campbell. He was on the Logic Live back on November 6th, so also check out that episode if you haven't already. And some very exciting stuff coming up for Logic Academy. We got new classes for winter 2023. We've got the Particle System Part 2 with Sinan Viral. He breaks down with us particles in his new video. You guys know him very well as he was on the second episode ever of Logic Live back in April 2020. This is absolutely great, so go check it out, and thank you, Sinan. And Intro to Matchbox Shaders by Graziella. There was an amazing Logic Live back on January 8th, hosted by Jeff Kyle, about how to write your own Matchbox shader. So I highly recommend, please go check it out. And Logic Academy. Join these three the rest of the series, Connecting and Form, Intro to NDI. All of these available for free at logic.tv or youtube.com/logictv. And we want to thank Autodesk for sponsoring these videos. Thank you so much. And speaking of Flame, 2023.3 became available for download recently, so don't forget to upgrade. There's some new solid features with the animation editor, bug fixes, so upgrade today, and that will do it for our slides. Hello. Hello again, friends. This is number 107. I'm your host, Amanda Elliott. Also, if you have any questions, go ahead and please put them in the chat and we will try to address them as we're going along with the show. So we have a great show today. So without further ado, Mark LaRue.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Did you like that intro?
I did. That's great.
I had to do
Thank
it.
you.
I was like, it rhymes. It's good.
Totally.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's warm out. It's Sunday, but
Where are you in the
awesome. Glad
world?
to be here.
Where are you in the world?
I am just outside of Boston,
Oh,
so just west
yeah.
of Boston. Yeah, maybe about 45 minutes.
Oh, that's cool. So weather's been good. Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of days actually in the 60s, which is kind of crazy for February.
Oh, that's cool.
I'll take
What
it.
are some hobbies that you like to do? You told me the other
A
day. It was
lot
so
of mountain
cool.
biking and flaming. So both of
There
those
you go.
things are well, not a hobby really for flame. That's a job, but yeah, no, a lot of mountain biking and whatnot, playing with two cats, and yeah, just enjoying life.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm really excited what you got to showcase. We did run through the other day, and this was like, it's so mind blowing. It's really great. So, you know what? Let's get started. I'm going to hand you over the screen and let's get started.
Sure. Yeah, so the main focus on kind of what I want to showcase today in regards to some techniques I've developed over 10 years as a flame artist. And a lot just kind of comes down to actual, some really time saving techniques, especially with rotoscoping. And the way that kind of is going to play out is that I'm looking at this coming much more from a three-dimensional background. So I used to be a 3D artist, a lot of time, a lot of years using Maya, different software, tracking softwares, and everything. And when I got into Flame, a lot of these things kind of made sense to me, but I never really saw anyone else doing sort of these techniques this way. So we're going to start off very basic, and then things will start to get more advanced as time goes on. And as Amanda said, please ask questions and whatnot. So I'm just going to jump into a batch setup here. And this is just a little context. This is a spot for Cadillac. This is a director's cut. And so they came to us to kind of make their director's cut better. And that required they shot this car on this psych, and they want to make it look like it's on an alien planet. So of course, obviously, rotoscoping is going to be one of the first things that you have to do. And so what I have here is a pretty basic setup, but what's going on? Let's see if get the in here pretty close. So, typical door, whatever. We got to rotoscope this, get this guy out of there, and have this stuff. But the way that I sort of approach this, instead of just kind of drawing out a mask, laying it down, and then, just starting with the vertices, is I always go to basically a axis node. And so what happens is, let's go to a 2-up view here. And then we'll look at the top view. This is actually like roto in 3D space. So instead of looking at this as a flat image, I'm looking at it as an actual, like something that would be obviously in real life as like a 3D model. And let's see here. So this is the actual roto that's coming out that I'm working on. And what's really beneficial about this sort of approach is, once you sort of get one axis in the place it needs to be, then you can start positioning other axes into 3D space that will then go along for the ride. So like this mirror here is actually kind of coming off of the door where it would be sort of in space. And so that's all, like there's no animate, like very few actual keyframe animations on the vertices, which will keep the vertices from sort of sliding around, which is one thing with roto that's really hard, is to kind of articulate those points but not have them swimming up and down the spline points. So what you'll get is you'll get much more accurate roto doing something this way that you would normally, or most people I think would look at it as just a flat image and then they're going to draw out a mask and then just start moving the points. The last thing I do is move the points. I literally do everything I can with an axis to then drive all the points as animation. So we could do something pretty fast here. Just kind of just do a little bit of this live. I have to gamma up on this. The color correction is so dark. And so if I bring out a plane, let's see, get rid of that.
Okay. So was this a job that you actually worked on pretty recent?
Yeah, this is actually ongoing, but I was able to get the rights to be able to showcase this. So here's a flat plane on the surface. I'm going to move the axis point to a place that makes sense. And then what I'll do is I'll immediately start pushing it back into Z space because I kind of look at the front of what's closest to camera, obviously would be where you would start. So the door is not closest to camera. And then, so I'm just going to do a little bit of scaling here. And obviously, a door is pretty rectangular. So let's bring that out a bit. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to get some positioning. So we have something in Z space. It's rotated on the Y. So it literally is, if we look at the top down, it's now actually, in a logical place on this car. Even though it's not like 3D accurate, it doesn't need to be. So we'll get a couple points here. Come up. Okay. So we've got 5 vertices and an axis, and at some point, so we've got there's a 2D track that I'm doing because there's a push in on the car. So I'm just going to grab that from this node here. Okay, so that changed the position a little bit. Let's go to object. Okay. And we'll bring it up. Now, so now this will go along for, okay, perfect. So that's moving based upon a tracked point here because this car is actually static. So we're just worrying about the door. Now, okay, so I'm only going to animate the Y rotation of this as it needs to be. So, okay, so we're going like this. We have 3 keyframes. And so maybe we need 1 more or so. Okay. So that alone takes care of most of the animation for this door. Obviously, things can get finessed as one might choose or wish, but this is in terms of demo purposes. That sort of makes that happen. Now, there's no keyframes at all on any of the vertices because I haven't moved those. So what's great about that is what I would then do next is, kind of finesse this a little bit. There's a curve in the door here, so I probably need something like that. And then before I start making more keyframes on the vertices, I'm just going to kind of do a little house cleaning here, which is on the first keyframe, I need to kind of set all my points. If they're going to be smooth Bezier handles, corners, any of that, because otherwise then you have to do that on every single keyframe, which can be kind of, it's extremely annoying. So you kind of want to just take care of this up front. And then my next step, so we got this door, something that is more in line with the way it looks. Is before I start actually moving points around, now that I have the access with its animation, is I want to duplicate. So I have keyframes that are set on this axis point, and I want to have basically sister keyframes on the same exact frames that are basically dummy keyframes. So what I mean by that is I'm just going to go through. So if I select the GMask, select the axis, go to the dual mode here. So I'll set a key, I'll alt left click, set a key, alt left click, set a key, alt left click, set a key. So now what I have is I have points. I have 4 keyframes that line up exactly with the keyframes of the axis. And if there was an automated way to do this, which I've exhaustively looked, I would love to know, because this is 42 frames and obviously this is a very short shot. So if the shot was much longer than that, right, doing that alt click set key nonsense can get very tedious. But now I have basically mirrored keyframes to the access animation. And so when I go ahead and make my modifications here, then basically the actual movement of what I'm working on here has a much better sensibility about where it needs to be in regards to the 3D space. So, so like we got like a little bit, so we're a little bit off. So I'm like, okay, I need to kind of just pull this out a bit. And now, so this is a way to sort of refine that animation on top of those keyframes. But most of this is all done from the axis point. So we just did the door, or let's say good enough for now. And there's obviously a window. So that needs to get done. And we have the mirror that also needs to get done. So we've got the animation happening from this axis here. And we have animation now set with a lot of duplicate keyframes from this axis point. So now that there's this object that lives in 3D space relative to a nondescript point, except that this is a hinge more or less of the door, I can then start building masks that also are in 3D space that will basically go along for the ride, if you will, and will start to make things a lot easier. So let's grab another GMask. And
actually, we do have an important question. Zanana wants to know actually what kind of keyboard that you're using. He likes the sound of the keys.
Oh, it's a Rocat.
Nice.
Yeah. So okay. So before I do that, we'll do. I have to show. Okay, so we'll do. The window is kind of like a trapezoid-esque shape. So something like this, right? So this is flat in space. Like our doors here, the windows here, doesn't make any sense. So what I'm going to do is I'll move its access point kind of to an area that it would need to be. I'd bring it up. I parent it to this. And now what we're doing is, so here it is in space, and we're going to move it very similar to where the main door is. And we also know that the window has curves down, right? A regular door has there's the door and then there's the window. So it kind of does something like this. So we'll get this like that. And so now we can move this down in a space that makes sense. So keep that like that. This comes down. Now we'll just kind of get these keyframes these vertices kind of where they need to be. Okay, so again, let's take a look-see here. Okay, so it needs a little bit of help. So that means there's probably a rotational issue on it. Let's see. It's not. Okay, so it is working as it should. But we haven't even set any keyframe. We haven't done any animation on this at all up until this point. So take a look-see here. Okay, so now we need to kind of offset that. Go back to our object.
So I saw you flicking back and forth between worldview. Can you explain a little bit what the worldview is?
Yeah, so it's basically the way that the axis is going to sort of behave. Like worldview is the way that it exists in the world, and then the object view is basically the way that. So the second you kind of switch from object to world, basically you are it's allowing you to describe sort of the way you want it to sort of rotate or live in space. And I would rather this be on an object basis than a world basis, because right now this is world, so we have up y-axis and a across x-axis, but then the z-axis is just going back and forth, where this now actually lives in a different space according to that 3D system. So right, so this will allow us to kind of, we're starting to build out something that actually is in 3D here. And again,
Okay, I see.
this is
So
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so you built the door and then you put the axis at one point where it makes sense for the door to open. You take the window and you parent that window, that same axis. So like you haven't even made any keyframes for the door and the window opening at this point.
Yeah,
So they both kind of
exactly.
parent to each other. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So the only keyframes I've made is on the axis point, and then where this really starts to save a lot of time is it keeps the amount of vertice points needing animation to the absolute minimum, and that will in turn prevent swimming of the vertices along the splines, any of that kind of stuff that really kind of makes or break roto. So this is a very generalized and a simple way, example of sort of talking about the benefits of something like this. So I'll just go in because I've done this already, because I actually literally have to do this for a job. So there's the only thing here that's a lot of, every frame has a keyframe is because I track this. And so again, this whole thing, actually has some level of volume to it. So you can see like the mirror exists in the space that the mirror should, versus everything just kind of flat on top of frame. And four, right. So in this example, we have the door, the window, and the mirror all going along for the ride, and each one of these has very few keyframes, and it will all articulate exactly the way it should be. So so this is sort of the way that I would go about approaching doing roto, and it works really well for obviously this is symmetrical, so that's great, but the same theories approach into my same process would be for the exact same thing as doing like a human or anything organic, which, a lot of times, things get sent out to outsource, or, there's different AI tools now and everything, which is great. But this is a tried and true method that I've sort of, the way that I approach doing this kind of stuff. So realistically, at the end of the day, you have this, this roto all set, let's say, or whatever. And then if I were to duplicate all this, make a new axis point, and then we'll parent that to the main track. Okay, so now we have this new axis, and it's here. So what I'll do is I'll bring it down, let's say somewhere down here. And then I'll just flip this in Y to get, the reflections out of it. And
Oh,
so
nice. That was actually going to be
so
my next
basically, like, yeah,
question.
so like,
Yeah.
so now it's like, okay, so like I did that, and now basically all that animation's done. So like I only have to do things once. Like setting these things up in a logical manner basically allows me to sort of like rip through shots with roto at a much faster speed and maintain fidelity, because you're not relying on vertex animation, you're relying on axis animation, which in say like a 3D program would be like a null or a bone or something like that that would actually make sense. And so that's sort of how I go about sort of setting up this low level roto work. And it once you kind of get into that mode, it really starts to make a lot of sense, and then you can really start to bang through shots fast. So
So I was going to ask actually could you actually do the entire car and then flip it, or is it better to do each axis? Like you have the axis for the door, flip that first, and then the front grille, flip that first.
right. So let's see here.
Like rather than the entire car as a whole.
Right. So why I like to break it up into portions like that is, um, you know, it starts to make more sense. So like, there's a certain point where you're going to get diminished returns, right? Like I don't need to, based on the task here, I don't need to model out or like shape out the front of the car or anything like that. I just need the roto. But in dealing with moving objects that live in space, and if say there was another door, which there probably is in this car, behind this one, and that one needs to get roto too, I can just take that group and then push it all back into Z space, and it's going to inherit all that, go along for the ride, and it's going to start to line up much faster than like starting over and just drawing out random shapes for different stuff. And like I said, this is a very sort of basic level shot where something like this will save you a lot of time. And so the main things to take away on this is don't always look at roto as something that you're just doing like on top of an image. Like you can integrate it more, and by mirroring the keyframes from the axis to the vertices before you move any vertices, is something that will keep all those points really happy. So they're not like, again, moving along the splines, which can cause a lot of issues with roto, because things kind of fall into arbitrary space where you don't necessarily know where it's supposed to live. And then that can kind of start to, that all of a sudden that a vertex point will start to like slide down the spline if you're not being careful. And that will happen a lot on like, organic objects like people, anything like that with cloth, stuff like that we have to deal with all the time. So,
Okay. I was actually going to ask you though too. So you're doing this roto right here on a front like a front shot,
right.
So what if you had this same car that you needed a roto that was a front 3/4, so it's turned a little bit? Could you essentially take this same roto because it's 3D and slap it on there and do the points better?
Right. And based on different shots, like for instance, if I had a 90-degree shot of this car, so I had what the car looks like from the side, then I would probably go there, before I drew the door mask, I would probably do it on that one and then bring it over to this. So it actually makes a lot more sense based upon the shape of the door. I'm kind of just making some arbitrary points, but if I can get it more articulate, then I will go ahead and do that. And
yeah, like on the profile, you could just shut the door because it's in 3D space. You just shut the door and turn it, and you got the 100%. Profile.
Right. So if there aren't any questions, or if there are, let's hear them. Otherwise, I could probably move on to a different setup that.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions they want to put? Yeah. So far, so good. Yeah. I mean, it looks like people are just saying how cool this is, and Sweet. Yeah, they're loving it. So yeah, keep on going.
All right. So another car shot. let me hide this analysis and give you a little context here. So this is a spot for Dodge that I worked on, and it's for a Dodge Hellcat. So basically, they're calling it Bad Kitty because the Dodge is tooling around Detroit, kind of causing chaos. And one thing that the directors wanted after the fact, so that, you know, this car is going through, just doing awesome stuff, and then they wanted, there's a drone that follows the car, and so they wanted lasers, or a laser coming from the drone to the car, like leading the car along. Like a laser would make a cat go crazy. So I had to build out all the lasers on this shot, and there's a few more. So like this is going on, and then we have a shot here. And what's hard, some of these shots, based upon the amount of smoke, how dark they were when they were color corrected, I wasn't on set, so I wasn't able to get certain things from set. So basically this is like, okay, you get all this stuff shot and you're like, all right, now you have to do this. And so what I'm going to show in this setup, which is this shot here, is, again, I gammed it up because the color correction is so dark, is I had to get holdouts for all the windows. Let's take a look at this shot. Okay, right here. So get up on this. You can see the laser effect, and then it needs to reflect into all the windows here as well, to kind of get it into a more final composition. So what I did is I did a 3D track of the shot using the camera analysis, and this is actually an 8K shot the way it was. So I was actually surprised it was even able to do it, given that how slow this is. And what I'll do is I'll shut off, so we don't need to see the camera analysis anymore. But what I have is I have some roto shapes that I made that have there's no animation on them whatsoever, except that they exist in 3D space where these windows are. And what will happen is, obviously they'll go along for the entire ride of the shot, which is great. But you know, and so I haven't set any of the any animation on it at all. It's just that it lives in 3D space. Now, if we go to a 2 up here, right? So this looks, from a side view, very similar to what this would look like if you were looking directly at the building, right? The camera's pointing down the street, so this is off into, you know, some kind of perspective space, and we have this built out. So I've got this group of windows built. There's no animation on them. Everything's going along for the ride. Now, what I could do here is I could take, so we have another bank of windows that's here.
I actually have a question about the windows. Not sure if you just addressed it, but rather than doing individual windows, could you do one big window and then do holdouts for the stripe or the lines in the middle?
Yeah.
Like, what do you prefer?
So you can do that. So you can do that. The one thing that I will find that is sort of annoying is how, you know, and then you would have to basically color correct or change the color of those masks to basically give you the holdouts. Or if you dealt with sort of like the combining of them, you are going to get to a point where you're going to have diminished returns on the amount of those things that you have. So I kind of, it's like I'm kind of almost rotoring based on the negative space of the windows, almost as the windows are holes, and the framing would be like the positive space. So I try to kind of avoid that sometimes, just because the math gets a little wacky with like how many inverted masks can you have against a regular mask that then doesn't cause problems. So you certainly can. It's just that there might be a situation where you might find yourself like, this isn't working, and then you're going to have to export out a bunch of mats separately and then subtract or do the different math operations to kind of poke those holes in. So I'm kind of just doing it in a way that is grabbing everything I actually just need here without having to do that, if that makes sense. So what
Yes,
I'll do
awesome.
is,
Thank you.
yeah, no worries. So again, we'll parent a new axis here. We'll grab these, just duplicate, and then see, go through, get our new set, and let's look from the side here. So I want to move the center of this to kind of get into a position, and we'll look at a different. Okay, so that looks wrong, and this one. Okay. So sometimes the numbers kind of can get a little wonky, but let's see. Okay. So now all I have to do is move this new set of windows in Z space, right? And things might need to get modified a little bit, but for the most part, let's take a look at that. We have that whole set basically set as well. So these types of things where you're like, oh, I got to do all these windows and everything like that, start to become extremely fast to do. And it's just one of those things that, I've always found to really help me sort of coming at Flame from like a 3D background. All this stuff actually makes a lot more sense when you can look at it at the different angles, and like, this makes sense because this is the way it, or very close to the way it looks like it would live in the real world. And then having that with the camera track, now we're in a place where we can just start ripping. We're starting to describe the scene, and doing that basically allows us to kind of get in a position where things are then start really kind of coming through a lot faster. So if work had to get done on the road or whatever, if you were to build this out, you could build cubes, you could have like actual 3D geometry become things. There's a lot of different options here that you could, the way you want to do it. And this is just something that, I've always kind of looked at as a way to kind of automate a lot of these monotonous tasks, such as roto, into a way that then makes a lot more sense. So I can touch on that some more. I don't have a setup for it, but I can leverage a different spot for context. So if we go back, this shot right here. So there's the drone, and there's a camera zoom in. The drone is moving in some regard above the car in a 3D space, and I had to figure out like, okay, like, how am I going to animate this thing? Like, if I just do a 2D move on it, like, I'm not going to get the benefits of like actual 3D, which is that you're going to start to get situations where like it's wider up here and shorter down here because the drone is actually closer to camera. So given that there's all this going on, I basically have to do a manual track because I don't like, a lot of this stuff isn't going to track right given the color correction, what you might do. And it's just going to kind of like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So one of the things that I've done or have sort of gotten used to is what we'll look at in it's a different shot, but it will make sense, which is I have a plate here where there was, they shot, this spot is a journey of this golf ball going through different places, and sort of set a little more context.
I have a quick question for you. Do you actually
Yeah.
prefer working on? There's a question in the chat. When you start working on a project, do you prefer working on an already color graded footage or flat?
I will request flat for keying if I need it. Otherwise, for the most part, I find that it's a lot easier to get client buy off working on stuff as color graded. And most of the stuff that comes in, by the time it comes to me, it's already graded. So, it's getting graded at company 3, different places. And that's a process that's happening beforehand. So, yeah, like I don't always get raw, but if I'm doing keys, then I'll always request that versus the color graded stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, this spot is this little girl. She's got a golf club and she has aspirations to become a golfer. So we've got a golf ball and she hits this golf ball and it starts on this whole process going through the world, and going into different environments where a golf ball normally wouldn't be, like here in the courthouse. And it travels through this kitchen. So this shot right here that I'm going to show you on, it comes out of the drainage. I don't know. I guess it was in the soup and then they poured the soup down the drain. I don't know. But the golf ball there goes into the background, and they shot 2 plates, but they didn't like the trajectory of the golf ball. So that had to get redone. And instead of going to a 3D department or to a, something more where you're going to have a little more control over that, basically, I did everything with a 3D golf ball inside of Flame. And what I'm going to show you is from the side view here. Let's take a look. Comes on. Make sure here.
So this kind of reminds me of have you ever gone into the kitchen to get a glass of water or a cup of water at 2 a.m, and you go in the cupboard and you grab the plastic cup and another plastic cup falls on the floor and it just keeps bouncing and it doesn't stop. It seems like it's forever. Right. Kind of reminds me of that. Wakes up everybody in the house.
Right. So I'm just trying to, okay. Yeah. So, what is happening here is that there's I basically have the motion path for the golf ball, going back into space. And let's take a look. Yeah. So this kind of does get a little annoying in Flame, is that if you go into your node preferences and look at display, so in an ortho view, I have to set this number extremely high. Like I'm at 200,000 right now. And it has to get bigger and bigger depending upon what you need for space. So then the interactivity of it gets a little wonky. But basically what's happening here is we're following the golf ball. So here's the new trajectory of the golf ball. And this allows you to see a view of it that actually makes sense, because this is like the arc of what a bouncing ball would do. And so in relation to that, leveraging the 3D space, like you're going to get a much more accurate and sort of honest representation of that object. So in regards to the other shot with the laser, I would make, an axis point, and then I would be looking down on it, from a top down view, and basically have a actual, the camera or the animation path should look like a circle, because that's exactly what that drone is doing. And that's going to describe something much closer than just doing something in 2D that isn't going to give you that Z change. And that's what you need, or that's what I needed to then get the laser to actually be thick at one end, thin at the other, because it's actually following something in actual 3D space versus just being on top of the image. So that's another thing that you know, doesn't really get used too often, is the if you go to the object here, is the path. This node down here where we have, you have prop for your scale, proportions, and then you have path, which will give you that actual motion path that you might need, or a visualization of something, the way it's going to look as it moves through space and time. So that's something that I use quite often, just to kind of be able to build something in 3D that then and this shot was perfect for it, because they didn't like the way that the actual ball looked. So we had to come up with a solution, and I was able to do this live with them in Suite and sort of be like, how many bounces do you want? And it just, just kept adding on to that motion path until we, everyone was happy with the placement of everything for that. So that being said, I've got one more pretty sweet setup to show.
Bring
And
it.
let me know if there's any other questions, and I can answer those.
Yeah, so far, nothing. We're good. Yeah, keep rolling, man.
Cool. So let's jump into this next.
Actually, I have a couple questions. For the going back to the first one with the car, I think you mentioned something about people. Is this the same kind of concept that you could use with people anatomically, like putting the anchor points
Yeah. So
there?
right. So I would build, so let's say something like a shoulder, for instance, and then you have your arm and you have your elbow and you have your wrist. I would start, say, with the shoulder. If the person's walking, then I would just animate my roto, but based on the axis only, until most of the animation was figured out, like all the major poses were figured out, positions and whatnot. And then I would go back in and match the keyframes for the vertices to the same keyframes to the axis, and then be able to control that based on that. And that will give you a lot better, especially as like cloth starts to fold, or if you have a shirt that starts to buckle, where you would have, your elbow and your forearm and your upper arm kind of come together, like you're going to get those creases and stuff. This will keep that the vertices from sliding around in there pretty good. So I would say, yeah, it's totally valid for people and organic objects.
Cool. And then lastly, is this kind of like your go-to method every time that you have roto you need to do? Or is there like when you see a shot, you're like, oh, I can just do this 2D. I don't have to do 3D objects for this one.
Yeah, so there's definitely, like, if I'm like, hey, look, I can definitely just bang something out in 2D and it's going to be fine. Or if it's something very sort of flat and sort of ask for something to be more two-dimensional, I'm not always, say, like modeling out my roto, but there are times and places where it totally, you by sort of having this in the back of your mind as an option to do, now you have more tips in your toolbox to be able to like dissect what's the fastest way of doing something. And so it's not every time I'm doing it, but it's a lot of it. So it's sort of like, I'd say it's probably like 85% of the roto I do would be done in that kind of fashion.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. So this shot is from a spot that was for the military, and the premise of the spot is we'll just take a look at it since I have it. The storyline is that this guy here is in his like regular day-to-day life, going to work or something, and then he sees this woman and kid, and he decides to, offer her a hand. And so then they do a clever trick where he's going down, and then when he comes up, he's like in this other world, which is actually of him being in the military. So he sees himself here, and he's in this other world, and he's helping people. So like it's to obviously promote military or that kind of stuff. What I'm going to showcase is that in doing this shot with the shoot, there's all this destruction that needs to happen. So a lot of this stuff is in camera, but then there's augmentation that needed to happen to like make it look more destructed, so it seems like more real to life. And so when I jump to the batch setup, is showing how you can leverage Lidar data in your setups. And this on set, they shot Lidar. So what's actually happening in here is I have a digital map painting that adds destruction to this. So I wanted to do a camera projection of it, but instead of like kind of doing something arbitrary, is that I have the actual Lidar data here in my action, and it actually looks something more like this. So this is just looking at like an ambient occlusion lookout of it. And so then I can actually do my projection onto actual like in real world geometry that's like super like very high res compared to like something you might get in doing like photogrammetry or anything else, or like a suit, kind of like building out a model in a way that doesn't work. And I can show you the extent of what that will look like in this setup. So I will hide this mask.
I guess starting from the beginning with the Lidar, like, do you have to request that? Is it something that's already on set, or like how do you get that to
Right.
even begin
So in
with?
that regard, the company I work for is VFX. We actually have a Lidar. We have a scanning like department. So this was something that actually they went out and did. So because it was like in the brief in pre-pro, they didn't know how much were things going to get modified. So basically by doing a Lidar, it allowed us to be, if they want to go really crazy with adding all sorts of stuff, or sort of like if like, they wanted, a tornado to come through, right? Like the geometry is already there for either the 3D team to like completely understand where things are in space, or in this case for me to sort of leverage that data and be able to then do traditional 2D techniques like camera projections of matte paintings onto this geometry that then all goes for the ride. So um, if I look at this in another view, so this is the actual like the entire scene here. And you can see like, there's trees. This is probably a light from set. And so now that there's like an actual like 3D scene basically in here, all the things that I've talked to up to this point become very relevant, because now you have the places in, you have a camera track, you have actual geometry from set, and you have places where you can either bring in roto in a 3D way, you can bring in models, you can, do camera projections, all this stuff, which is super cool. And, it's something that would normally just go right to, a different department, a 3D department. But I figured, hey, why not try to bring this into Flame and utilize it? And it was really easy to do. So by doing that, now I can add in, animated lights. Like there's in the actual shot, there's, basically an emergency vehicle in the background that's, casting light onto this house, and that house in the actual spot with the matte projections. We have, the lighting is coming off those 3D lights that I'm setting up in that environment, and that's all going along for the ride. And basically, really just kind of allows you to like go wild with a setup with that kind of data directly inside of Flame, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, that's great. Here's a question: how do you align the Lidar to the camera track?
Yeah, so great question. Is basically it was like once it came in, I just had to basically rotate it around, and just kind of using like for this shot, I kind of was like, well, once I found like this truck, so if I go to this other action here, And we look at that. So you can start to see, and if I hide this, yeah. So you can start to see literally like there's like, you can start to see like truck outline. I basically just had to rotate it into place. Like it didn't take long at all. And then once like I had a few key points lined up, then everything just worked. So it really was not hard to do. I was kind of concerned with that, starting it off, but it really went kind of seamless. And yeah, so it was just kind of like, using a place on that big map that had from all the data and be like, okay, that's the truck. Now I just need to kind of bring that into frame and get that, in position. And then the camera track lined up with it, basically like pretty damn close, well, close enough for me to do everything that I had to do for the shot. So,
Oh, good.
but
So
yeah,
there's
that's
actually
always a concern.
Oh, no, that's great, actually. I was just going to say there's actually one more question from Josh. He's saying, when you get the LiDAR data from the scan, how do you connect to the plate?
So you would have the LiDAR data, which then has to get decimated through like a reality capture type of program. Like there's definitely some step that I'm not involved in to then actually have the 3D data. So this is an Alembic file that I'm bringing in. And then, so again, to do the plate, like once I'm importing that into action and using a specific spot, like say it's like the chimney up here or something, which in some, or a tree or something that you're like, hey, that is exactly here. Then you can just start rotating the entire world to then kind of, once you start to get it into an area, like you're within like, okay, maybe you're within a couple feet, and then it's like maybe it just needs to get scaled a little bit, and it's like it really only takes like maybe like 15 minutes of time just kind of like rotating here and there, and then you're gonna hone in on exactly where that position is in regards to where it lives inside of the plate. So this is something that if the clients needed a lot more involvement in terms of destruction and whatnot, now you're in a position where you're working with real world data that is scanned, and that allows all that other kind of CG stuff to happen. But utilizing this directly in Flame allows you a lot of those sort of 3D tasks, such as 3D, map projections and whatnot onto the geometry. And it's going to be so much more accurate. So if you had a still frame of like, say, like a clean plate or something, and then you want to animate a camera around, like, right, like that projection is going to give you like a lot more parallax and a lot of different items that you're just not going to get just a few pieces of geometry in the action. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I got to show. But yeah.
No, that's totally great. Thanks for answering those questions too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. That was really cool.
Oh, totally.
Watching all of, I got to go try that immediately though. Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. We're all amazed by everything that you did today.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. All right, we'll see you over in the patrons in the chat, or actually in the Zoom. Yes, Q&A.
Right.
We'll see you there.
All right. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we go, got to give away some prizes. So let's go on over to prize time. Oh, yay. Here we go. So what we got on the block for today is we got some new merch. We got a notebook available in white, black, blue, or green. That's going to be for the first person. For the next one, we have a year of Boris of X. So let's spin the wheel. Oh, and here's the thing. Here's all the people that registered. Hopefully you're here. If you're here, say hi in the chat. You can win your prize. Daniel Morris. Are you here? Is Daniel Morris here? Are they here? That's the deal, right? You got to be here to win. I hope so. I don't think we have a Daniel Morris. Should I go to the next one? I think we're going to go to the next one. Going to the next one. Are all these people here? We're about to find out. Yes. Is David here? Oh no. Am I going to keep on going through until we find someone? All right, we're going to do it one more time. Hopefully someone's here. I wasn't able to double check. Where'd my music go? Where are these people? Where'd they go? All right, this is what we're going to do. Okay. We're going to do it one more time because where do I find the people that registered? That's you? Oh, wait. Yay. Okay. Okay, so we got the first prize. Awesome. Yay, that's me. Okay, thank you for commenting. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to do the next one. Wayne. Yeah, okay. Yep, Wayne gets a notebook. There we go. Okay. Second one is for 1 year Boris effects. Wayne. Okay. Next one. I hope you're here. Are you here? Is Ralph here? Are they here? Hi, hi, hi. Hi, yes. Okay, yes. Thank you so much. All right, thanks for that. Let's go to our closing slides. For our upcoming sessions, hold tight. We're working on a lineup of shows for the rest of February and March, so stay tuned. If you haven't signed up for the forum, head on over and do so at forum.logik.tv. It's daily conversations, Q&A, and just general stuff related to Flame. And while you're there, click on the link to sign up for Discord, where we're having more of our informal chats and hangouts. It's a great place to be. I'm there too. This episode of Logik Live is going to join all the other episodes of Logik Live online later today. And we've got a whole bunch of new podcasts coming out soon. If you haven't already, you can check out my latest podcast, number 35, with Crystal Monique Alamar. She's a junior flame artist in Atlanta, Georgia. She's got a great story. So you can find these on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere podcasts are available. And check this out. Randy, look at that. Look at all those subscribers. Amazing. If you haven't subscribed already to the YouTube channel, please do. We would love it if you did. And thank you to all our patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to support what we're doing at Logik, please become a patron and going over to patreon.com/LogikTV. And check out the merch store, because we got notebooks now too. Check that out. And a big thank you to Boris Effects for sponsoring Logik Live. If you would like to save 50% on everything they make, you can use the new code LOGIK-2022, discount code at checkout. Thank you to AJA for sponsoring Logik Live. They've been together with Flame since 2006. And we would also like to thank our friends at Hot Spring, the newest sponsor of Logik Live. They're the future of VFX outsourcing. Yeah, okay. They're the future of VFX outsourcing. How about that? Connecting you to all other artists around the world to help you get your projects done. So you can find them at thehotspring.com. That's going to do it for today, folks. Thank you to everyone. A big thank you to Mark for being on the show. We're now going to head over to the Logik patrons only chat. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone in the Logik community. You guys are amazing. Have a great weekend and see you next time.